After 3 days of pre-fishing, I had a pretty good idea what I needed to do for the tournament. So I got up early and headed to the launch. I was joined by 13 or 14 other anglers, and at 6:30 we took off into the darkness, heading to our spots. I picked up the half-ounce Z-Man jackhammer, started throwing it around, tossed it back to the back of this pocket, and this fish picked it up right away. As I set the hook, she started coming at me, and I didn't realize how big it was until she jumped out of the water. At this point, I've got her too close to the boat. I had to let out a bit of the line, but she still had problems getting into my net. Luckily for me, I was able to net her. And this big girl went 21¼ inches. I started flipping my punch rig around with a 6th dark water bug on it. As I tossed it into these lilies here and bounced it up and down, I felt something, so I gave it a little slack, and then I felt it again, so I jacked it. As I fought it through these lilies, I had a good hook set in it, and I knew it. Luckily, I was able to get this second quality fish in the boat at 20½ inches, just as another kayaker came around the bend and cheered me on. After a couple hours of not getting any bites, I made my way back across the lake and saw a lily pad field that had a clearing behind it. So I made my way back to it and started throwing a Gambler Fat Ace, Texas rigged in Junebug Blue. I had one bass pick it up and I set the hook, but she ended up coming off. So I repositioned myself and threw the opposite direction at the same spot, and was lucky enough to get this 16-inch bass to pick it up, and I set the hook. I was able to get her in the net without any problems, and was able to score this fish. A few minutes later, I had turned around, faced the other direction, and was throwing the Fat Ace around a laydown just to my left, off the video, which you can't see. I brought it through there a couple of times with nothing to show. This particular cast, I was bringing it back to me, and just about as it got to the boat, I was getting ready to lift it up out of the water when this 19-inch largemouth came up and grabbed it. I dropped the rod tip and let it take it for a second, and then I set the hook. Luckily for me, she slid right into the net, and I had gained my third quality fish at 19 inches. So with 30 minutes left in the tournament, I decided to go to the next little clearing and through this half-ounce fire crawl jackhammer down the cut. I was lucky enough to have this 15¼ inch hit it and ski right into the net. This fish culled my smallest and brought me to 92 inches for the day. So at the end of the day, I was sitting in 3rd place for Kissimmee Trail 1 and 4th place for day 1 of the Tenvitational, with day 2 coming up. Going into day 2, I had decided that I was going to start where I ended day 1. It seemed like there were quite a few fish in there, so that's where I headed. Luckily, no one else was in my area. I got there and waited until line's end. With the low light conditions as they were, I knew I wanted to start with a Stanley top toad in white. I tossed it around a few times, having 2 hits and misses, and then I tossed it back through a tree and had this nice 18¼ inch fish come up and smack it. As she went running, I knew it was a pretty good one. I grabbed my net and got her in. It was a pretty good start. As I continued to throw the top toad, I hooked up with a small 13¼ inch fish for my third one, but knew I would need to cull it later. I continued to throw the top toad, threw it across a point of lilies, and brought it back slowly to the boat. As it almost reached the boat, another quality fish came up and smoked it. I gave it a second and hit it hard. It was so close to the boat, I didn't even have to reel anymore, which caused me a little bit of problems getting into the net. This was an 18-inch fish. I continued to throw the top toad, and 2 casts later, I tossed it across the pond and brought it back slowly. Just about a boat length away, my 4th fish and 3rd quality fish came up and smacked it. I gave it a second and hit it, and then I reeled it in too far. Unfortunately, I got my line caught in the motor, and it took a second to get it out. I was able to scoop the fish up pretty easily and brought it into the boat. I was pretty excited at this point. My heart was racing. I knew I had 3 quality fish and 1 more little one, and I was well on my way. My bite died off, so I decided to head out and check a couple other spots. I never did find another bite, so I just went fishing. I started throwing the jackhammer around. I came upon a little clear spot, threw the jackhammer out there, was reeling it back when this nice quality fish came up and hit it right at the top of the water. With the aid of the St. Croix rod, I was able to get her in the net. Luckily, this was my 4th quality fish and 5th overall at 18¾ I kept looking for that next quality bite, and I got one. But unfortunately, as she came running at me, was all I could do to try to keep up with her with my reel. She went straight up under the boat, and I heard a pop, and she was gone. The hook had come out. Nearing the end of the day, I was finally able to catch a couple more fish on the jackhammer. Unfortunately, the biggest I caught was 16.5, which brought me to 92 inches. At the end of the day, I couldn't have been happier with my performance. I had once again scored 92 inches and placed 2nd to Russ Snyder's in the KBF Kissimmee Trail number 2. As I headed back across the lake and to the launch, I couldn't have been happier. I'd come down to Florida for an adventure and to clear my head after the loss of my father at the end of December. And I'm going home with the experience of a lifetime. I would like to thank Kelly and Alan for allowing me to stay with them while I was down in Florida. I would also like to thank everyone who sent texts and messages and posts, etc., wishing me well. It was awesome. And finally, I want to thank my wife, who took care of the house and the kids and the dogs and wished me on and kept me straight, kept my head in the game. I love you, babe.